Good morning, everybody. You heard the bell, very important. When the bell rings, you have to be here. Mrs. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to open the 24th session of the Inter-Parliamentary Conference on the Common Foreign and Security Policy and Security and Defense Policy. Welcome. I hope everyone had a safe travel to Bruges. And I hope you will have the time to enjoy this beautiful city with the wonderful streets, the canals, and our fantastic cultural heritage. But let me first walk through some practical issues. All the thematic sessions will take place in this room and be organized in the same way. Details about the simultaneous translation and the use of Wi-Fi you will find on the instruction sheet on your table. And when you push floor, that will be English. Very important, and maybe you discovered already, the permanent coffee counter. It's at your disposal back on the side room, where you can keep following the conference room also from the screen. So there will be no pause, so you can take your coffee when you want. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. And I hope you will enjoy the sessions, and I'm looking forward to all your contributions. And now I will first give the floor to Stephanie Doze. She is our Speaker of the Belgian Senate. You have the floor.
Dear Els, dear colleagues, dear members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it is with a great pleasure and with a big honor that I welcome you in Bruges. And I hope really that many of you had already the chance to discover this really magnificent city, which has been rightfully named as a UNESCO World Heritage. Bruges is really a crown jewel of Belgium and European history. It is a testament to the rich culture that unites our continent. This is a place where European story is being told through art, through architecture and living memories. And now, dear colleagues, I want you to take a moment. Take a moment to reflect and imagine that it is all gone. No belfry, no cathedral, no 14th century paintings, no museums, no schools where local history is taught, no tourists discovering our common cultural identity. And then, imagine a foreign power marching through this city, stripping away all signs that once we were European, tearing down all buildings and replacing school books with an alternative history. What would you say then? You would say then that this is a cultural genocide. Well, my dear colleagues, this is exactly what is happening today in Ukraine. Wherever Russian boots touch the ground, Ukrainian culture is erased. Artifacts are destroyed or displaced. And even worse, children are being kidnapped and brainwashed. When I went to Kiev last year, I visited the St. Sophia Cathedral. In the cathedral stands the tomb of Yaroslav the Wise, one of the greatest leaders of the 10th century Kievan state, stretching from the Black Sea up to the frozen woods of Karelia. In those days, Kiev built its cathedrals, while Moscow was only a provincial village. And yet few Russians today would be able to tell you that, because Putin has rewritten history to make it match his ideology. And right now, he is using brutish force to impose his delirium on innocent sovereign nations. And dear colleagues, make no mistake. The Russians did not stop at Crimea. They did not stop at Donetsk. And they will not stop at Kiev. Putin is not just a modern Tsar seeking some territorial enlargement. He is an ideological warmonger who has made the mere existence of foreign countries into a threat to Russia, because in absence of any good domestic policy, he needs war for his own political survival. And in absence of any logical arguments for this war, he needs brainwashing to gather support. Both his wars and his brainwashing are spilling over today into our European Union. The threat of undermining the peace and prosperity that our union has built over the past 70 years has never been larger. Even more so, because Europe stands as a lonely beacon of stability in an increasingly unsafe world. Gaza, Sudan, Ethiopia, Yemen. There are more than 100 armed conflicts being battled out today. And they are all wars against freedom. They are all wars against democracy, because democracy means dialogue. It means that you choose the cooperation over the battlefields. And China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran are emerging as dominant regional powers, disturbing the balance we have known for decades. They are offering political, military, and financial support beyond their immediate regions and thereby buying loyalty. To paraphrase a foreign leader, when the Chinese come, we get a new hospital. When the Europeans come, we get a lecture. Our international leadership is being challenged. As a consequence, but just as worrying, we see an international decline in trust in our democratic institutions. The United States, who once were Europeans' safeguards, are more and more consumed by their own domestic troubles. And the Economist Democracy Index of the state of democracy in the world shows, year after year, a steady decline. In a year where 80 countries, it's about the half of the world's population, will head to the polls. So here, my dear colleagues, here we have it. Military threats, security concerns, and an ideological infiltration of illiberal ideas here, in the birthplace of democracy here in Europe. So must I stress how important this conference is? And I know I must not worry. I know that these issues have been on the top of your agenda for many, many years. And also, as Europeans, we know that crises can be solved and even accompanied by opportunities. Because of one thing we can be sure. The European people look at us. They look at us, the members of parliaments, for answers. Our discussions, they can and they will bring solutions, because we are still united by the vision of a future where peace, democracy, and prosperity guide the world. Those three goals can only be obtained by coherent and effective foreign policy, security policy, and defense policy. I wish you, dear colleagues, fruitful debates, which will surely be inspired and enriched by the magnificent backdrop of this city. Our continent counts really much on you. And finally, dear colleagues, to make up for not choosing the Belgian Federal Parliament for these discussions, we have made this video to show you where we usually work for our citizens. I thank you for your attention.
Welcome to the Belgian Federal Parliament. It's a pity we can't welcome you in our building in Brussels, because the Belgian Parliament is a charming and open house, conducive to debate and meetings, which makes politics accessible to everyone.
Les séances sont ouvertes, les commissions sont ouvertes au public, mais les gens ne le savent pas toujours. Du coup, on fait venir le contenu à eux par les réseaux sociaux.
The Belgian Federal Parliament aims to be an inclusive parliament, reflecting the population it represents. Since 2019, for the first time in Belgium's history, both chambers have been presided over by a woman. Furthermore, we work and debate in both Dutch and French. The Belgian Federal Parliament is one of the only multilingual parliaments in the European Union.
Ja, de charme van België en Brussel zit in hun meertaligheid. Dus als tolken zorgen wij ervoor dat elke senator of elk Kamerlid zijn eigen taal kan spreken.
The Belgian Federal Parliament consists of two chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Together, they form Belgium's federal legislature.
Toutes les réunions parlementaires sont visibles sur le site internet de la Chambre en direct et là vous pouvez choisir directement sur lachambre.be.
Green is the color of the House of Representatives. This is where laws are made and where we control the federal government and the budget. This is where we make policy.
Tijdens het vragenuurtje in de Kamer krijgt iedereen 2 minuten spreektijd, geen uitzonderingen. Iedereen is gelijk voor de wet.
The color of the Senate is red. This is a place of reflection and of meeting between the three language communities in all transparency.
Wij tikken alles uit, inderdaad. Alles wat er gebeurt, alles wat er gezegd wordt in de vergaderingen. Dat wil zeggen dat alles wat er gebeurt in de zaal terug te vinden is in het integraal verslag.
The Belgian Federal Parliament is a fascinating place where hundreds of people are passionately committed to democracy.
J'habite au Parlement. J'ai grandi ici en tant que fils de concierge. Et maintenant, depuis 22 ans, je suis moi-même concierge. C'est un privilège. C'est quand même le palais de la nation, ça représente le peuple. Et donc, c'est quand même un grand privilège de pouvoir vivre ici et d'être domicilié ici.
This is a place where the past is cherished.
Het federaal parlement van België is een van de enige 3 parlementen in de wereld met een eigen bijaard.
But it's also the place where we prepare for the future.
Au Parlement fédéral, nous tenons compte de la planète et donc je roule 100% électrique.
The Belgian Federal Parliament is an open house for debate and meeting. The future of Belgium starts here.
Verschillende scholen vanuit heel België kruipen eigenlijk in de rol van een echte parlementariër. En wij proberen eigenlijk de jongeren zoveel mogelijk te stimuleren om het woord te nemen. Dat is wel een stap voor heel veel, maar eens dat ze die stap hebben gezet, zijn ze eigenlijk on fire om in het leven te kruipen van een echte parlementariër.
You saw the nice working place of Mrs. Speaker and myself, but we are here now. It's also very nice over here, but it's also worthy visit also in Brussels when you're there. So I'd like to thank Mrs. Speaker for her introduction, and now I'll ask Mr. David McAllister, Chair of the European Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee, to take the floor. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you, Els, for giving me the floor. Madam Speaker, Madam Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. As Chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs, it is also my pleasure and honour to welcome you here in Bruges, Brugge, for this 24th edition of the Inter-Parliamentary Conference, IPC, for our common foreign and security policy, as well as for our common security and defence policy. It is organised in the framework of the parliamentary dimension of the Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union. So let me first of all, on behalf of all participants, thank our colleagues from the Belgian Federal Parliament, with both its chambers, for organising this event and for hosting us. I extend my appreciation especially to Madam Stefanie Doos, the Speaker of the Senate, and Madam Els van Hoof, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Representatives, for your kind welcome and for bringing us together in this beautiful historic town of Bruges. I'm also particularly pleased to welcome so many colleagues from the national parliaments. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, needless to say, we are going through extremely challenging times with wars in Europe and in our immediate neighbourhood. This is a real geopolitical shift. How we respond is not just an ordinary policy choice. How we respond will determine nothing less than the fate and the future of our continent and our European Union. The CFSP and the CSDP are at the heart of this response, and it is our joint responsibility to help make that happen. These policies aim to enhance and protect the rules-based international order without a set framework in which states interact. Peace and prosperity are seriously at risk. So defending the international rules-based order should therefore be the top priority. If states choose to blatantly violate this order, we have no choice but to act. I sincerely hope, like I guess all of you, that one day the Russian Federation will stop its aggressive expansionist tendencies and return to the international order. But until then, we need to stand firm and we need to stand united. Our unwavering support to Ukraine is part of this response. The European Union has just agreed on the Ukraine facility, providing Ukraine with 50 billion euros to mitigate the unprecedented challenge of a country at war. Yet, we need to do more. Together with our partners, we all, on both sides of the Atlantic, need to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, not only for as long as it takes, but whatever it takes. To withstand the threat to the rules-based order, we as European Union should also step up our game. We are known for our soft power. We are very soft. We are known for our soft power based on democratic values, and rightly so. But our soft power needs a hard shell. It needs to be complemented by increased cooperation on security and on defense. This is how we can solidify our hard power and protect our soft power. Colleagues, we urgently need stronger and smarter defense cooperation in the European Union. Member states need to procure jointly to improve the interoperability of our armed forces and to reduce costs for our taxpayers. The EU Defence Industry Reinforcement Act, EDIRPA, is an important starting point, but we know it is far from enough. We must help the European defence industry increase its production capacity to ensure that not only our armed forces, but more importantly, the Ukrainian armed forces are better equipped. Also in that regard, we made a first step with the Act in support of ammunition production, ASAP, but we definitely need to go further with the future European Defence Investment Programme and by establishing a well-funded Ukraine Assistance Fund under the European Peace Facility. Having said all this, a stronger, a more autonomous, united and strategic European defence and security policy should reinforce and, under no circumstances, undermine transatlantic cooperation and NATO. NATO was, NATO is, NATO will remain the cornerstone of our transatlantic security and defence cooperation. Therefore, having Sweden and Finland join NATO is an excellent step, and I am particularly glad that also the Swedish membership has now finally been settled. This is a real added value for NATO. And many countries, including my own home country, Germany, are at last committing to the 2% spending target of NATO. This needs to be the new real minimum, not maximum. Finally, a word on the horrific situation in the Middle East, on which we will have the chance to hold an urgency debate this afternoon. I'm sure all of us realize how extremely sensitive this topic is, and I do hope our discussions will reflect the responsibility we all have towards finding viable solutions. There is certainly a particularly urgency to break the cycle of violence, avoiding a regional escalation, as well as relaunching the peace process. Finally, in the broader region, it is good to see the European Union is taking responsibility. Following the Houthi attacks on commercial shipping off the coast of Yemen, I welcome the launch of the Maritime Security Operation Aspides under the Common Security and Defence Policy and in close cooperation with regional actors and international partners, especially the United States and the United Kingdom. This is a necessary step to address the maritime security situation from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. So, colleagues, I am looking forward to interesting panels and debates. Let me once again thank our Belgian hosts for the excellent cooperation and preparation, and I wish us all an excellent conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for your wonderful speech. Dear Minister, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. I'm truly delighted to welcome you on the 24th Inter-Parliamentary Conference as part of the Belgian presidency of the EU. As I was preparing for today, I was reminded that I got my first real job in '93, when Belgium was holding also the EU presidency. I was a junior assistant to a minister. It was the start of my career. And the EU has provided me personally with great opportunities and has brought peace, stability, and prosperity for decades to millions of others. But today, we cannot be unaware of the turbulent seas the EU is facing. We would fool ourselves by stating the contrary. But how to calm Europe's turbulent waters? Allow me to use the words of the late Jacques Delors. In Europe, you will need the firefighter, but also the architect. Indeed, many challenges are awaiting architects. And the challenges are manifold, including the migration crisis, the brutal invasion in Ukraine, and the appalling conflict in Gaza, triggered by Hamas' horrible attacks. More than ever, the EU must work towards ending this humanitarian tragedy, because whether you live in Gaza, Rafah, Ascalon, or Tel Aviv, a perspective of sustainable peace is needed. Reason why the Troika decided to organize also this afternoon an urgent debate on the matter during this conference. So the question in front of us is how to lead Europeans ship through these turbulent waters. Clearly, business as usual is not the answer. We need a union that is more resilient and capable of defending itself, not only economically, but also militarily within NATO. At the same time, the EU should be able to react more swiftly to high waves. This will require an open discussion on the use of qualified majority in foreign and security policy. And the Belgian presidency is keen to address these topics, and let us discuss them profoundly over the next 2 days. Dear colleagues, a conference on the EU's foreign and security policy should go beyond discussing our own procedures and problems. We must equally look to address the needs of our like-minded neighbors. The support for Ukraine is a priority for the Belgian presidency. And during my visit to Kiev last weekend on the 24th of February, and I see a lot of colleagues which are also chairing the different committees of foreign affairs which were in the delegation, we saw with our own eyes how Ukraine stays in the fight to uphold the values of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law, our European core values. How could we not help them? But with sympathy, they can't stop tanks. And we sent a lot of sympathy and goods, but not enough support that matters to win the war on the battlefield. And as President Roosevelt said, speak softly and carry a big stick. You will get far. Nobody wants war, but military strength is needed when things go diplomatically wrong. The EU is leading by example. compared to the US, by providing €50 billion financial support for Ukraine facility to mitigate the impact of war. But on the military level, too little, too late is not an option. Yes, we need to reinforce our European defense industry, but on very short notice, we have to address our own national stocks of ammunition for immediate use on the battlefield, and financially join the Czech initiative for a joint purchase of shells on the global market. Dear colleagues, let us be very clear. Ukraine's ultimate victory will consist of nothing less than a full accession to our European family. In that regard, we can only applaud the adoption of the enlargement package on the 8th of November of last year. But such an enlargement can only be successful if the EU's internal structures have been evolved to be able to absorb this enlargement. We need a union that is future-proof in all facets. Dear colleagues, the Belgian presidency is also aiming to intensifying cooperation with our African neighbors, and rightfully so. It is no option for the EU to abandon this region. Others are more than eager to fill in this void. China, for instance, recently opened a leadership school in Tanzania. We all know what they will teach there. Clearly not democracy or human rights. The EU is presented with a clear choice. Or we remain committed to multilateralism and cooperation with our southern neighbors, or we give free way to the rise of authoritarianism and further instability in Africa. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, to be strong externally, we need stronger societies, stronger citizens, and stronger democracies internally. As a former European Council President, Herman Van Rompuy said, the end of the EU and the euro has been predicted many times, but in vain. The EU caravan moves on. Indeed, dear colleagues, let's move on together, not only as firefighters, but also as architects for a better future. I look forward to your insightful contributions. Thank you so much.